This video covers my lecture for Chapter 1. So we're going to start off with some computer programming technology. Whenever people talk about the word programming, I generally think of it as somebody sitting down and writing instructions for a computer to execute. A computer program is a set of instructions that a computer executes. Sometimes we just call that a program. And then, of course, programmers are people that actually write that code that a computer executes. There's a lot of different programming languages. In this class, we'll be talking about Visual Basic, but there's also others like C#, C++, and Java, Python, so on and so forth, Perl. There's a ton of hundreds, thousands of different programming languages. But we'll be focused on in this class on Visual Basic, integrated development environment, or called an IDE. In this class, we'll be using Visual Basic to complete those tasks. Graphical user interface is just what you see on the computer screen. If there's pretty graphics like what we see here, if there's pictures, stuff like that. Console application mostly just has text, like similar to what you'd see right here, even though that is part of a graphical user interface in this example. A console application would look similar to this, where it just has text. So here's an example of an application to where it allows us to be able to put this up on the screen whenever it's executed, and then to exit it, we click on the exit button here. So if you want to run this application, you can actually download it and execute it on your computer if you'd like. We will not be doing that here. Programmer's job is mostly, really it's about solving a problem, but we quite often will call that coding. Programmer's job is actually to try to we try to understand a problem and then try to program a solution to that problem. If you're really lucky, you'll get a basic description of the problem you're trying to solve, but quite often you'll have to question your customer, or the person that you're writing the program for, to get an idea of what they're wanting. To be honest with you, from the experiences that I've had, quite often the person that's wanting you to write a program doesn't know really what they want. They kind of do, but they don't really know how to put it in words. So quite often what you have to do is you kind of got to go through a dance with them to maybe mock up a program. Or quite often what I'll do is I'll just start sitting down and start writing out on a piece of paper, maybe drawing what the different screens will look like and the different steps of what the user wants the program to do. Sometimes they'll want a program to enter in and keep track of data, and so you start off with figuring out which elements that they want. But to kind of keep this short, quite often it just means working with an end user to figure out what they want and then start writing that code. And you'll continue making modifications and adjustments until that user is happy. Then even after the user is happy, it may be a short period of time, or it could be years, that the user will come back and want to make updates or adjustments to it. Maybe there's new fields or something that they want to add, or things that they want to take away. The visual programming language, visual basic programming language, is object-oriented. Really, the best way to think of this is that everything is an object. So everything that can be seen, touched, or used, or an idea, you can think of that as an object. At this time, you don't really have to know much more than that, but just keep that in mind that it's object-oriented. Everything is defined as a class. You'll see that is used in a lot of the examples that we have. You can run some applications if you'd like to get a general idea of some of the things that Visual Basic will do. Here's the instructions on how to do that. And these here are called radio buttons. This is a list box. This is text box. These are labels, and these are buttons, just in case if you didn't know. But you can go through these if you want. There's several different examples if you'd like to go through these. Or you can just pick one at random. It's really up to you. The next thing is the Visual Studio IDE. If you have not had a chance to look at the tour video for Visual Studio, please go back and look at that. I describe a lot of what you see here. I talk about the different windows that are on the screen, what they do. So go back and look at that video if you haven't had a chance to do that. And here's the code window, which I do show in the tour video, so I will not cover that here. If you want to go more in depth, you can read this, and it kind of goes through and explains things on how this all works. Assigning names to objects quite often, like for example, if you've got a button, you'll want to name that button something. Visual Basic actually defaults to using a certain name like button 1. Then whenever you create another button, it's button 2. Generally, you don't want to stick with those names. You'll want to give more descriptive names, which means giving it a name that describes what the button is for. Like for example, if a button is made to exit, maybe you want to call it button exit. And BTN EXIT, we'll see several examples of that. Quite often in Visual Basic, they use a camel case, which means that you'll have, and I'll show you down here. Best way to show this is just looking at some examples. Like we start off here with form, FRM, and then main, the main form button exit. And notice that it starts off with lowercase btn for button, and then EXIT with E uppercase. That way it's a little easier to read, and you also know where the next word is if the first letter is uppercase. So here's a text box that holds a first name, so on and so forth. So I think that's about it. So that's it for chapter 1. Feel free that if something I'm describing here doesn't make a lot of sense, go back and read that in the chapter. Maybe look at some of the mini quizzes to make sure that you are understanding the ideas and concepts well. And I'll see you next time.